Hello, good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock, so sorry if we've kept anybody waiting, but I'm joined by Steve Hackett, and Steve is sporting a very good look this afternoon of a circle with another circle and a little icon in the middle of it. That's because we've only just discovered this afternoon that his multiple devices, which which he has with him, don't actually support video. One of the
Well, they normally do on
on
either Zoom or on Skype.
Yeah,
There's a new one on me, I must admit. So you're techier than thou.
well, I try to be a trailblazer when it comes to these things. This is broadcast software. Of course, Zoom works with everything, as does anything else, which you would expect from something that made 380 billion pounds in the year or something similar to that. Yeah, because they've got the money to make sure it works with everything.
Yes.
Anyway, we're not here to talk technology. Although we could do. We could. We're here to talk about music and your life in music, sir. Now, I've only got 20 minutes with you, which is actually for me a very short period of time, because normally I bore my people, my interviewees to death for about an hour, but we won't do that. I will keep on track. I promise I'll do that. And I wanted to get straight into talking about this new record of yours, which I can bring a nice visual up of as well on the screen. For you might not be able to see it, but there we are. So we're standing on a balcony, and we're looking out over the sea, under a Mediterranean sky.
Yes.
Wonderful title, and I thought fairly needed at this juncture, with everybody being stuck at home and not being able to travel anywhere. Was this part of the plan? With the title of this album?
That was not lost on us with the title and the idea of a virtual trip or an imaginative trip around the Mediterranean to different countries, where each piece signifies a particular country, and so the music varies in as much as acoustic music does. But then I think of it as an orchestral album with interjections of acoustic music. So of course, orchestras are, by their very nature, acoustic, but it comes in with a pretty heavy assault orally, I'd say. It's pretty loud right at the front, and then other things start to happen. So there's this sort of, it comes in a kind of warring style, really. Busting in.
Well, I haven't heard the whole album, but I've heard obviously the bits that one can listen to at the moment. The walled city, Medina, or is it Medina? Is that how
Medina, that's right.
Yeah, pronouncing that. I mean, that's you've been producing pieces which are sort of neoclassical for some time in effect, but actually that's probably the closest you've come in a way to a fully classical piece, isn't it?
Well, I've been doing every few years or so. I do something that's acoustic. I'm a rock player, but I love acoustic music at its best. I like the purity of it, and ever since 1980 or so, I've been recording things that really are pretty much 90% acoustic. But then I tend to have sort of a 10-year hiatus between these types of albums and do the other things that that are rock, hopefully in the broadest sense of the word. But this one is radical for me. It's a radical departure from the previous acoustic albums I've done. I don't want to go on labor it, but it's got more of an exotic flavour to it. There's a nod to world music in it, lots of instruments that people perhaps are less familiar with. So you get orchestra, but then you get the additions of these other things that people might assume that it's a flute or a trumpet. They might find it's something else, and they might think it's a guitar, but find out it's an Arabian lute.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because you are a man who seems to be able to pick up any instrument and play it. Is it really that easy, or is it a bit like languages, where when you've dealt with several different instruments of a particular line, it then gets that little bit easier?
Well, I think stringed instruments for guitarists, there will be, for instance, the ability to play a thing called the charango, which is a Peruvian instrument. It's a stringed instrument. It's short scale. I'm using it in a kind of Greek style, a little bit like a mandolin, a little bit like a bouzouki, but on one of the tracks called "The Memory of Myth." I'm quite proud of the fact that I played that convincingly, and it sounds right. It's a lovely sound, and it's not the sort of thing you're going to find on every rock and rollers record, that's for sure.
No.
So it's lovely to be able to do that and just step outside the confines of what people expect that you're going to be able to do. So it's a bit of character acting with strange instruments. That's how I see it.
Do people actually introduce you to these instruments, or do you find them and then just teach yourself how to play them?
Well, that one was a gift. When I was in Peru the first time, some fans gave me this instrument, and it turned out to be a really, really good one, and quite lovely. And I've used it a bit, not as much as I might, but I will do in the future. So there's some more stuff to come from that. It's a really great instrument. It's really lovely, and so it doesn't always have to be full on rock guitar. That's my point. Melodies are good.
Yeah.
Very old fashioned concept melodies, but I do love them, and they can make a hell of a difference. It's not enough just to be merely modern, I think.
No, but you do like to collaborate as well, and to push yourself that way as well. I mean, I tweeted the other day that I was listening to your joint album with the Magical Stag, which I love. It's a beautiful album, and it reminded me a little bit of, I don't know whether you remember a band going back called Iona, which Nick Beggs was in for a while, but it kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, Jarbe are they're a Hungarian band with an African name, and the name means free. So basically, most of what they do is entirely improvised, or at least when I play with them live, it's mainly improvised. The songs that I join in on with them, and other things they do, very jazzy, funky at times, but then there's this other thing. They do the world music thing, and Hungary seems to be at the crossroads of Europe, and I've met lots of musicians through them with instruments that I would never normally work with, like cymbalum or gypsy violin, different types of things that are very, very, very odd and are not really Western at all. And they have these different sort of improvisational styles. They might have drone-based stuff, or work in a gypsy style of improvisation. Very, very interesting. So I've occasionally worked with them with African musicians. And, one guy who's on this album, this one, Under a Mediterranean Sky, is a guy from Azerbaijan who's really great, playing a thing called the tar, T-A-R, small, short scale instrument, obviously linked to the guitar and the sitar and the kithara, ancient Greece stuff. He's probably the foremost player in the world, and we've got him on this. Again, he's from Azerbaijan. It's strange. On the track that he's on, we've got a guy playing the duduk from Armenia, and the interesting thing is, having just put this together, then suddenly those two nations were at war over the Nagorno-Karabakh region and disputed territories. All been sorted out now until the next ding dong, one suspects. But it's nice that in music you can do things that politicians don't do. In other words, bring people together in the same piece of music. So in the past, I'd worked with an Israeli and a Palestinian who were friends, and so again, I think, you know, music doing things where politicians perhaps drive people apart. No more so in the case of what's going on in Britain right now. But music, yes, I like working with teams from all over the world, as well as a house band. That I'd like to say to you that the house band actually is all in one country, but I've already got a band where there's one guy who lives in, who's Swedish, lives in Sweden. Another guy who's Swedish, lives in Austria. Sax player, flute player, also on this album. He now lives in Denmark, which just leaves two of us.
Yeah,
where Roger
you must be missing traveling immensely.
Well, yeah, I do, but then I think to be at home and to be allowed
is a special thing as well.
That's a special thing, yeah, and to be creative. So I never really feel as though I'm in one place, because I've got a mind that's kind of zooming out the window off to other climes. And I think ever since I discovered books, which was shortly after I left school, I always thought that they were passports to other places and times. So just being in one place doesn't mean to say you're fixed, not in the imagination, which I think is probably more powerful. I've always had my head in the clouds. I can't help it. So I'm not really in lockdown emotionally and imaginatively at the moment.
Well, that's good to hear. I think it's been an interesting time for everybody in terms of how different people have coped with it, and you know, speaking in the sort of business world, you know, there's some people that have thrived through this time in terms of actually finding their true self again, in a way, and actually. Well,
that's right. Yeah, I think it's been productive for me. It's been the most productive time I've had since I've been in the music business. You know, we had a live album followed by an autobiography, followed by this acoustic album, which is out in a matter of days. Followed by, well, shortly after, you know, I'll be getting back to rock stuff. So chances are, you know, it's going at a fair pace, and the longer we're in lockdown, then chances are the more product I can bring to fruition without the distraction of gigs.
Yeah. But now, talking about threads and bringing things together through music, you magically did that a few years back. And when I was talking to your promotions company, they said, "Did he?" And I said, "Yeah, he did." Because I mean, I've been a Marillion fan for years, and I know you've done a fair bit of work with Steve Rothery.
Yeah.
But you brought Steve Rothery together, but with Nick Kershaw, and I wanted to bring that up because that wasn't necessarily an obvious choice, but for me, it was fantastic because growing up, I listened to two types of music.
Yeah.
One was because I had friends that were 10 years older than me, which wouldn't probably happen now, but it was kind of socially acceptable where I grew up and in the time. But I had a group of friends that at school, obviously, that were into sort of Duran Duran and Culture Club and everything else that was happening there. But then I also had a group of friends that were listening to Genesis and Deep Purple and Yes and Pink Floyd. And that's where my journey there started. But the one sort of pop element of it that really resonated with me at the time was Nick Kershaw. Always because I just thought he used some very interesting chord patterns, and he was actually slightly more intelligent in terms of the way that he handled pop than some other people. What drew you to Nick?
Well, I think that Nick has a great voice and happens to be a great musician. And I think to be a pop star in the 80s, the focus of media is always the idea, oh, you do one thing and this is what we celebrate you for. So you mean you play guitar as well? Well, that's okay, but you are an icon. And I think to be that visible at that stage, great, of course, because you end up accessing a huge audience in the widest sense of the word. But then I think similarly with someone like Nick Beggs, who already knew Nick because they rose to prominence in the 80s. There was this sense that with Nick Beggs, that he felt that his heart was in prog, but he was known for something else. I mean, he was a pop star.
Yeah.
I remember stuff scrawled on the wall in Twickenham by the river, where I was living at the time, and it was Nick Beggs rules, okay, sort of writ large. And little did I know that I would end up working with him years later. So he managed to make that transition, and I think the same thing for Nick, where perhaps you don't have the same size of audience that you do when you're having #1 singles, but perhaps it's a more solid fan base, and to have the endorsement, I think, from different generations of musicians is what it's all about. And if you can get the endorsement via genre too, then so much the better. So for me, with Genesis, the moment we had the endorsement from John Lennon in '73, that was great. That was huge for me, and it made us think as a band that we were in with a chance when we were just starting to play clubs in America that would have us, and there weren't that many of them at the time. So they hadn't heard of us, they hadn't had a chance to be prejudicial towards us. But the American South, which we were touring for 6 years or so before we could do the South, and that was as a result of having done one nationwide TV show, the Mike Douglas show. So suddenly, that makes all the difference in the world. But if you're not getting that, then you've got to pay dues, just like jazzers do. And
yeah.
How do jazz virtuosos get to that point where they're playing, any Pizza Hut in town virtually that'll have them, and that's damn hard work. Those guys, like the bluesmen, are touring for 365 days a year. That's what it was like for guys like B.B. King. And then, if you're lucky, you get the endorsement from someone like Eric Clapton, long overdue, of course.
Yeah. Someone actually asked me earlier in the day when they said that, I said, well, I'm interviewing Steve Hackett from Genesis. They said, well, obviously, how does he make his money? Right. I think it's a question that goes through people's head, because they understand that, the Phil Collins of this world or the Peter Gabriel of this world, continue to have a career in hits, as it were.
Yeah.
But then there are people like you who are there still, and they're just carrying on through. But obviously, you managed to carve out a living.
I think, it's let's put it this way. I'm actually selling more now than I was when I was with Genesis, which is a strange thing, because although I think you reach a certain point where if you've had an uncompromising ethos, perhaps the best word is, that I've always played the music that I've loved, and I've always worked with the people that I admired, whether they were well known or not. And I've worked with plenty of stars, and I've worked with all sorts of people who are incredible. People like Evelyn Glennie. Did a series of gigs with her and wrote some stuff for her to do at the South Bank. But maybe not a lot of people will know that they didn't show up on the night. But that's the thing.
I was going to say, I mean, for me, that was my answer to him. I mean, it's the same as the Marillion boys would say, that they had the hits, they had Misplaced Childhood was a massive album, but they've reached a point where, and you hear them say in interview over and over again, that they feel very privileged to be at a position where they can make the music that they just love doing, and there's a sincerity about what they do, and an absolute, as you say, sort of truth about what they do, which is just what fans buy into, and that's what I think keeps people like yourself at the forefront of fans, really.
I think that something happens, if you're in for the long haul, you get experience, but then you also get an audience that's hopefully aware of the drive towards integrity. I was working with Phil Collins' son, funnily enough, Simon, at one point, and he said to me, I like your stuff, it's got integrity. And I thought, this is Phil's son saying this, and so there's an appreciation from musicians, and tours have been doing very well. I mean, in recent years, I decided that I was going to play some Genesis material again, the stuff that we did in the 70s. And so I got it to the point where one half of the show is solo stuff, the other half is Genesis stuff. And as a result of that, I found that solo albums were selling better, because it was the very thing that had introduced me to a wider audience, was the thing that was working in reverse. Genesis introduced fans to me, but now it's the other way around, because the guys that were in the band basically refused to play that material that John Lennon liked that we did. And so for me, to have been a part of that band before it was a huge pop group was very important. It's like, how big does it have to get? So I'm very happy to go out and sometimes play the Albert Hall, and sometimes do Hammersmith, and do more and more gigs up and down the country. And before the pandemic hit, of course, we were billed to do 3 nights at the Palladium, and so it may well be that people are not aware of that unless they're watching the listings. I mean, I don't expect that I'm going to get played on Radio 1, sampled, yes, and played on Radio 1 on someone else's hip hop track or whatever it is, but it doesn't really matter.
No.
At the end of the day, I'm making at least 2 kinds of album, one of which is this Under a Mediterranean Sky, which is basically, as you said, I'm glad you didn't say pseudo classical, but you said something neoclassical, and that's fine. I think in spirit it's cinematic, it's part classical, it's acoustic, it's part flamenco, it's part this, that, and the other. But what there is not is an electric guitar on it.
No. Well, I could actually see a completely classical album in you at some point, maybe.
Well, I did do an album that had 6 pieces of Bach on it, the really
sure
tribute a few years ago, and that's the last time I did an acoustic album. So I will undertake, the really serious pieces, because I think by now I can, that there's an audience that are prepared to listen to that. At the same time, they might enjoy, my first solo thing from 1975. So I keep it going, and in a way, it's opposite ends of the musical spectrum that I've subjected my poor fans to, over the years.
No,
I've used them mightily, but
well, we love it. That's why. And do you know what? I also think we love the fact that you're you actually are a workhorse as well, because you are prolific.
I think that's a way to go, because it's not about the performance of any one particular album. I'm very happy if that happens. I'm very happy if I get a PRS statement and it says 300 films, none of which I'll probably ever see, have used your work, such and such. So this stuff, goes into the public consciousness without necessarily a name tag on it, but just because it happens to suit that particular movie. So I'm very happy about that. And for me, music is all about, it's this very pleasant marathon, and I'm not tired by being in the game longer than most people. I'm energized and quickened by it. So I'm just nuts about music. I mean, I was signing all these copies of the latest album today, and
you be careful you don't get carpal tunnel doing that.
Oh, I know, carpal tunnel. Yeah, it'll make you go blind. I tell you, too much of that. And we were listening to violin concertos because her dad was a violinist and grandfather, and she was trained as a violinist when she was a kid, but she came up with a lot of the melodies that are on this new album of mine. So it's great. She's a very hard worker. If you think I'm a workhorse, I mean, God, she's made films, written books. She organizes me in an extraordinary way, and I can guarantee she'll be working downstairs doing something right now. I don't even have to try and catch her out. She barely stops for tea. It's an extraordinary thing. Yeah.
As the ergonomist side of me says, make sure she takes a break. Okay, so
well, exactly. I do. I have to insist at times, because otherwise, she just falls over at the end of the night, and she says, "Oh, I can't watch any TV. My eyes have gone," and I want to make sure that's not a permanent state of affairs, because she is very, very dedicated.
This is a question you've never been asked before, but probably. But the other thing that I do live is ergonomic podcasts, etc., because that's the other side of what I do. In terms of keeping those fingers moving as fast as they do, especially on the Spanish guitar elements of this album, or warming up is probably something you have to do for that. But do you ever find that then when you go and use a computer mouse, you start to get aches and pains, or is it or do you actually find that doing all of that fast guitar work actually helps with the computer as well?
Well, basically, I sorry to say, I leave that to my wife, and I'm very old-fashioned. I prefer pen and paper. It's a conscious choice.
I think that's very sensible.
It's not that I'm a technophobe. It's just that I realise that to function at peak, once you subscribe, then you will be distracted for at least 50% of your life. Because I know fans who are like this. I was a very late starter with driving cars.
Right.
When I was a Genesis, I wasn't driving. It wasn't until I was 35 that I passed the driving test. And it was only because I moved out of London. Up to then, I was very happy to be walking everywhere. And I used to think, poor fools, they're all stuck with Res Park and I've got to dash out to the meter and all that. We're slaves to the technology. So I walked more, got more fresh air. And so I think I was right to do that, you see. And so I guess it's because I've got a limited involvement with the modern world. And when I write things, I prefer to write them. I write things down on a pad. That's my. I write music that way. If I don't have an instrument in front of me, that is. But I mean, picking up the electric guitar, first time we plugged it in, I thought, oh, perhaps I'm going to get electrocuted as a kid, and I might have done if it had gone straight into the wall. But luckily, I've been pretty careful. Over the years, I still play electric. Harmonica and sing, but trying to aim towards orchestras, I think, is the big thing. What's going to be my fingers? What's going to be the orchestra? What's going to be the big, microcosm, i.e., me, versus macrocosm, orchestra, or band? What do I delegate? But I'm very lucky. My fingers are working really, really well. I haven't had arthritis. Tempting fate saying that. If I'm having a good nail day, that's really good. I mean, I heard this story that Cliff Richard used to spend an hour a day on his hair, presumably before a performance and what have you, an appearance, as it were. And then I read that Paco de Lucia spent an hour on his nails every
I think Mike Oldfield didn't he, as well?
Well, there you go. But if you put them all together, you never get out of the house. So I've got some sympathy with those, with that view.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Brill Cream? And
well, what did happen to Brill Cream? I think it still exists in some circles.
Yeah.
But there's, I think what happened to Brill Cream is the same as what happened to a lot of different things. There's now a million different versions of the same thing, and
that's true, isn't it? Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah, and that's the problem with the modern world. It's trying to work out what's good and what's not.
They said you'd be glad of that in the war, That's
but perhaps we're not, and perhaps we need to get back to simpler things. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today.
That's brilliant.
If people want to get away from it for a bit in their imagination, I recommend they listen to the album when it comes out.
Thank you. And it is an escape. It is purely escapist, and I make no apologies for that. But I think because we're all in the people's prison, as my friend David Erdos says, we need to be able to get away somehow.
Yeah, and I think this is the perfect antidote to sitting behind four walls at the moment. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you. It's been brilliant talking to you.
Thank you, and you. And we will put this on the podcast, and people can listen to it whilst driving in their cars.
Indeed.
Or not, because they can't necessarily go very far at the moment.
Well, that's right. Yes, it's probably not an album to listen to when you're in the car, in case you have one of those condor moments or siesta moment.
Yeah.
But it does come blasting in from time to time, and those are the bits that will keep you awake. But it is a kind of slightly chill out orientated thing as well, but it's got the full on stuff. So
we have one last request. A lady called Natalie Rosemary Jude has asked, could you ask Steve to wish my dad happy birthday for tomorrow? He's a big fan, apparently.
Oh, indeed. Okay, so this is Steve Hackett here, wishing Natalie's dad a very happy birthday tomorrow.
I'm sure that's made his day. And I must say, because I did promise him that I would, to say hi to you from Aziz Ibrahim, because I am talking to him next week, doing one of these. And again, a guy that likes to play multiple different instruments.
Yes, fantastic. Well, please say hi from me and wish him the best.
I will. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for doing that. And I can't wait to listen to the whole album.
Good.
So,
I hope you enjoy the rest of it. That's really
I will do. Thank you very much. Bye for now. Bye, Steve.